Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those all around the world who are joining us for the Microsoft Teams for Education webinar. My name's Dominic Williamson, and I'm a Program Manager as part of the Teams for Education product group. This webinar today is an introduction to Teams for staff and educators within both K-12 and higher education. And for those who would like to stay in contact with myself, I'm a program manager in the Teams product group, and my Twitter handle is DominicWillIT, and so it'd certainly be welcome follow-up questions, as well as also particularly it's a place to share some of the latest information. So what are we going to be covering today? Well, we've got a few key topics. First of all, for those who are either brand new to Teams or are still early in their journey using the platform, I'm going to share with you some use cases and real example of how other schools and universities are using Teams today. Then we're going to really talk about, well, what is Teams? And of course, it is the hub for teamwork and communication. And then it's going to be a bit of a working session where I'll take you through some hands-on real examples of how Teams is used, as well as also some of the capabilities and scenarios that it can be applied. And then finally, the next step. So the resources that we have to help you get started on your journey with using Microsoft Teams within your organization. Now, an important one is, of course, this is a live webinar, so you're very welcome to use the conversation window over on the left-hand side to be able to ask questions, and myself and the team will answer those questions for you. And if you are then watching this on demand after this session, please feel free to then follow up and connect with us as part of our forum that we have. So if you visit the link aka.ms/Tech Community Teams EDU. That is a great forum to then ask follow-up questions if you are watching this on demand. So let's begin. So for those who are brand new to Microsoft Teams for Education, the best way to think about it is the hub for modern education. It is the one hub that can connect everybody across scenarios. Whether you are a teacher, connecting and leading a course with students, that same platform that you use to deliver a class can then allow you to then also have a separate team where, for example, you coordinate and work together with other faculty and staff members. You can have teams then to support research projects. We can have teams for students to build community and give them a safe space to connect with one another as part of, if we think about particularly in higher education, on-campus interest groups or social activities. Or of course then also doing communities for things like professional development and professional learning communities. What's really powerful here is Teams is a flexible ecosystem that allows you to connect across multiple different scenarios within the same institution. In the past, we often would see the tool that you use to teach a class is a different tool to the one that you might use in a professional network. Or for students, it might be a different tool again that they use to connect with other students compared to what they would use in a course. And so Teams is incredibly powerful, and we should think of it as the hub that uniquely brings together the aspects that we need for communication and collaboration across a variety of scenarios in our organization. And so what do I mean by that? So Teams, firstly, is the hub for calls, chat, and then the ability to create teams for people to be able to work together. And so for those who have used Skype for Business in the past, Teams is the replacement to Skype for Business, but it has new infrastructure that allows it to do things that were never possible before. Allows fantastic online meetings, and for those who have the licenses, you can do full telephony calling, so you never need to give out your personal number, but people can still contact you across devices from physical handsets to the Teams app installed on your laptop or phone. But we take it further because now Teams integrates then, of course, all of the Office 365 services. So from Word, Excel, PowerPoint, you have then the capabilities that are richly and deeply integrated into Teams. You'll see there things like the Exchange calendar. When you create a meeting in Teams, that's using the one and same calendar. It's all of these services working together to allow people to communicate and collaborate. But this is where it gets particularly exciting. It's not just then the Microsoft apps and experiences that integrate deeply into Teams. We have a huge ecosystem of third-party applications from Wakelet, Quizlet, integrations with Moodle, and many, many more that allow you to really extend the capability of Teams, whether you're using it in a class teaching context, whether you're using it in a research context using apps like Research Space, or alternatively, if you're using it as part of internal operations and administrative tasks, we have integrations with project management tools like Jira. We have IT service desk management tools like Zendesk. We have many other tools like Trello, Asana that all integrate deeply within Teams. And so this is where it becomes particularly powerful when we say Teams for Education, because we then also have then deep integrations with capabilities like the OneNote class notebook. We have an assignment service. We have other educational apps like Flipgrid. So this is really where we're extending then the capabilities of Teams to be then powerful both in the classroom as well as also that hub that can connect many different aspects of how we need to run a school district or a university into a singular place. And this is really powerful when we think about Teams. So what does that look like if we show it in practice? So I'd like to share with you a really quick example of how then Teams is coming to life across the different scenarios. And this is from the University of Texas at Arlington. And we're going to see here for 2 minutes a real example of how Teams is being used at the university and also a few specific examples. And one that I'd like to really highlight and that you'll see in the video is from Dr. Timothy Ponce and how he is using it then within his course to help his students have then skills that will then be developed that they can take into the workplace. It's allowing him to create a more open and accessible class for his students. And this is where it's also particularly powerful. You'll see those different aspects coming to life and take notice of how Teams is being used for real-time collaboration on documents, the ability for online meetings, how assignments are integrated, and how communication is flowing more naturally and it's also more engaging between students and also then connecting staff members together. So here is the video.
We have a huge population of students, not only in our region, but we also serve students that are online. And our students are all juggling a lot. So we want to be sure that the resources that we have really are focused on our students.
I'm a lecturer in the Department of English here at the University of Texas, Arlington. My students tend to push away from the provided platforms that we offer for communication. Students don't want to use email.
It's a little bit intimidating because, you have to follow the standards. We're used to social media and just a quick instant messaging.
Before, I used other options like Remind text messaging service, Blackboard chat, or Canvas chat. I was seeing them struggling. And so what I began to think about was, how can I offer them a way to communicate with me in something that feels familiar, but is also in alignment with all university communication policies for students? And that's when I found out about Teams.
As a student, it's very useful for having everything in one area. It's very easy to just message a professor and they usually respond quickly. It's got assignments on there. I can share my screen.
One of the most powerful tools within teaching Teams is collaborative authorship. I'm able to open the same documents that they're opening and offer feedback while they're actually authoring the document.
It helps your assignment flow better. They are helping you along the way, just like if you would go to their office hours.
I am a student worker on campus, and that function is very useful for having team meetings with coworkers on the other side of the campus. I can just click a button and, hey, video chat real quick and show them what I'm looking at.
In an aggregate, it really helps our students juggle all of the things that they're trying to do and finish in a reasonable amount of time.
Using Microsoft Teams, it's made education accessible for a large, diverse audience of students, which is really something we have to think about as we're moving our students into the job market and we're looking at being good citizens of not only local, but also a global community.
Now, as part of that video, you heard about how then also that focus on job-ready skills. And this is where it's particularly powerful because Microsoft Teams for Education is then a tool that's also used in the workplace. Of course, the for education part is unique to education, but all of the online meeting capabilities, all of the real-time collaboration in documents, all of the capabilities around calling, and all of those deep integrations that we have for third-party apps, this is where we've seen Teams taken up tremendously at pace by then the enterprise and business world, with over 500,000 organizations right now today already using Teams, with 91 of the Fortune 100 companies using Teams across the world in 53 languages and with over 13 million daily active users. So this is a set of skills that yourself as a staff member, that your students are developing, that are relevant and usable and transferable across industries. And it's incredibly powerful then having students getting experience to this because it allows them to then transition into the workplace more effectively and more confidently. And so this is where you've seen now an example from within the US, but let's take a bit of a broader look at some of the other school districts and universities. This is where we've seen, for example, Brisbane Catholic Education. They presented recently, and you can see here some stats that were shared by Alan. They have 144 schools with over 33,000 active users within Teams, and that's where 20,000 of those classes are being automatically created using the school data sync system. And this is allowing this large school institution to be able to then effectively use Teams at scale. We're also then seeing UNSW, where Dr. Kellerman has created a bot. So he's not only then teaching with Teams, I should say, but he's then extending the capabilities of Teams by using that open ecosystem to not just integrate other apps, but to build his own apps. And so he's made a bot called Question. And so this was created in partnership with one of the Microsoft partners. And what that allows him to do is, as students are then asking questions, because he teaches a course of over 500 students, that question bot is able to then help answer those questions and then build up a knowledge base over time to help proactively give the right answers to the students. Particularly powerful when we think about that learner experience. How do we make sure that students are getting also that personalized learning? And so this is where it's not only helping to answer questions based on existing content that might have been asked in the past, but it's also then integrating those other experiences, those other sources of data within the context of Dr. Kellerman's course. And so you can see here, for example, Dr. Kellerman then records and shares his lectures live, so using an online Teams meeting, and then that is recorded and made available on demand via Microsoft Stream. And then QuestionBot is also able to help students because those recordings then are indexed, and then the transcription is available for students to be able to search. And then the QuestionBot can do the same and automatically jump to the right place to help students with revision, for example, for material or questions that they have within the course. And so this is incredibly powerful that we can now think about Teams not just as a platform for communication and working on documents. This is also a platform that you can extend and customize to add brand new experiences for your students, to extend the capabilities of the platform in ways that are unique to your organization, to your teaching style. It's incredibly powerful. And so this is where Microsoft Teams is available for free across devices. So whether you're using a Windows laptop or an Apple MacBook, you have exactly the same desktop experience with the Teams app. Of course, if you're using a tablet like an iPad or an Android tablet, again, you have access to the Teams application, as well as also on phones. And then we certainly have Teams available to be used within the browser across Edge, Chrome, Safari, and more. And so this is incredibly powerful what we can then do with Microsoft Teams, in particular when we think about students and their choice of devices and allowing them to be empowered to use their different devices in the context of learning. Now, moving into then specifically for Teams for Education, this is where we've extended the capabilities to bring in things like assignments. And so we have really rich experiences where you can then grade and review assignments, not just from a laptop, but also from a tablet and phone. So really saving time for educators who might be mobile or students who prefer to work on a smaller screen device. This is where we also now have plagiarism detection built in with the likes of Urkund, and we have Turnitin integration coming soon. We have the ability to save time for teachers where you can do automated marking through then using quizzes via Microsoft Forms. The ability to give meaningful feedback through using things like rubrics. And this is where we have that all of this grading is available across devices, as I mentioned a moment ago. And coming very shortly is the ability to then have a gradebook, which will give you a view across the student's performance within the context of your course. And so assignments today are very, very powerful, and you can see we're extending it further based on feedback. And it keeps getting better and better, and the focus is on creating an accessible, powerful, and also tool that is not just useful for students, but to save time for educators with those automation and things like quick marking and integration with plagiarism checking. So incredibly powerful. Now, I really wanted to also then highlight just those apps that I was mentioning a moment ago, because Teams is used not just in education, but also in enterprise. So this is where you will see enterprise-grade apps built into Teams, and this is where that app store, think about it just like your smartphone. Some apps are free, some apps are paid, but the App Store itself is reviewed. So for example, all of the apps in the App Store are reviewed by Microsoft within Microsoft Teams. So we make sure they meet security compliance standards from the point of view of the code integrity. But at that point, it's then up to that app developer where your data is stored and whether it's a free or paid service. So you can see there on the top left-hand side, Adobe is a really great example most people are aware of. To use an Adobe service, you will often need a paid license. And if you're storing your documents within their service, again, it is up to then those requirements and the privacy policy related to that service specifically. But what this is allowing you to do is, again, bring in those really powerful capabilities like Jira, like bringing in things like Bitbucket and many more, and allowing you to extend the team by giving a central place for your project management, a central place for your class, a central place for your research project to occur, while also bringing in third-party services. And so this is where, when we think about then also not just bringing in services, but also the ability to then connect people, not just physically in the same room, but around the lecture theatre, around the world, around the school district. This is where Teams has then the online meeting capabilities of up to 250 people in a Teams meeting, or up to 10,000 people in a live event. Note, live events does require a separate license, but this is particularly powerful if we think about learning at scale. So let's get into actually seeing what Microsoft Teams look like and going hands-on through a few example scenarios. Now, for those who are brand new to Teams, you can get started just by logging in. There's a quick short link. If you go to aka.ms/edu start, or if you go /get Teams, you can then get the Teams app if you don't already have it installed on your phone or laptop. This is a great way to begin now, and that'll then help you be able to follow along while I show you some examples from my side of things of what Microsoft Teams looks like. Let's transition across. So if you haven't already installed the Microsoft Teams app, the perfect place to begin is from office.com. And this is a place you should be coming to regularly, whether or not you're using Teams, because from here you can access your emails, you can access all of your files stored securely in OneDrive, work together in the browser in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneNote. And this is also then where we have access to things like Microsoft Forms, which allows us to create surveys and quizzes. We can see our recent files, and office.com is a place you should come back to almost every day because it gives you everything that you need as part of Office 365. Now, where we're going to go, though, of course, is the Microsoft Teams app available here. Now, keep in mind, as a rule of thumb, you should always be using the desktop Teams app. And the reason for that is because this gives you the best experience when you're doing things like online meetings. And the web browser, though very powerful, it also will allow you to do things like notification management through the desktop app. So this is where, if you can, install it. Otherwise, you can still definitely work in the browser very, very effectively, and particularly useful across shared devices. You can see here, by default, we land onto the Teams tab, as the name Microsoft Teams would suggest. And so I can immediately see the teams that I'm a part of, the entrepreneurship course that I'm teaching, part of the staff teams that I'm a member of, as well as also one of the health research projects I'm involved with. And on the left-hand side here allows me to easily navigate through the different parts of Microsoft Teams. So this left-hand navigation rail, this will allow me to see my activity feed, of which I currently have one activity notification. I have 2 unread chat messages. I've been notified in a team, and you can see here by that number 1 symbol, it lets me know that it's in my Pineview school staff team. I can see my assignments, calendar, calls, files, and then the apps that we have available. Last but not least is help. So if I click on help, I can see all of the training and information to help me get started. So what do each of these tabs do, and how do we use them? Let's begin. So from the activity feed, you'll see here, if I click on activity, this then gives me a summarized view of the activity that has last occurred. And notice that as soon as I went to the activity feed, and if I click on the activity itself, it takes me directly to the team where I need to be able to focus my attention because I've either been asked a question or I've been part of an announcement. So you can see here in this example, I am currently as part of the chaperones for the dance this Friday. You'll notice there is an Excel document, a conversation that has occurred, and Cara has asked if I can assist. So let's quickly respond to her question. I simply click on the Excel document and notice this is all within the context of this chat thread. I can close the chat thread and I can see there's 5 replies, but threaded conversations are an important concept when you are in the team space. So let's just quickly action this for Cara. Notice I have now loaded up Excel in the context of Teams. So this is using Excel Online. Really powerful because it allows us to work together in real time. If I need to, I can also still open in the desktop app of Excel if there is a more advanced desktop capability that's required. But in the context of this, I'm simply going to click Edit because I just need to make a quick edit and let everyone know that myself, in this example, Ken, who I've logged in as, I'm available to help out from 7 to 10 p.m. as part of this. And that's on the dance floor. And notice it even did things like within Excel of pre-fill and suggestions, very powerful and allows us all to work together. Easy. Now I've been able to complete my activity feed notification. And you'll see here that over time, this is a rich place where you'll see all the different activity that you're a part of. And you can also filter from that filter icon against things like mentions, replies, reactions, if you have any missed calls, and more. All right, that's the activity feed, and this is the place you should start your day. Next up, chat. So from chat, this gives us the ability to have private conversations or group conversations. So when would we use this? Well, imagine you have a group of colleagues, and rather than setting up a group email and then spamming each other's inboxes when you really just want to organize a catch up for lunch, Teams allows that more informal communication that's really effective for back and forth comms between a group of colleagues. So you can see here we have the lunch crew, so it's a few staff members who want to organize catching up for lunch. And so this means I don't have to give out my personal mobile number to be texting people, or I don't have to then start a group email conversation really easily. You can see here that Kara has suggested a place for lunch, and then this looks good, and I can reply here, I agree. Now notice you'll see here that right now in the lunch crew, we have also then a separate conversation with Kara one-on-one. So here this gives me the ability to have a private one-on-one conversation. You can see here we're discussing, asking how we've each been, and then if we want to catch up for coffee. Notice that Teams gives you a much richer conversation space, so we can also do things like add a bit of personality, like GIFs, having reactions. So for example, the ability to then also use conversation, which is much more akin to the kind of modern conversation experiences that you would expect. Particularly also this is very engaging when we think of using this with students, and we'll come back to that in a moment. So you can notice here I said, sounds great, see you then. And what's particularly powerful is where it says type a new message, we also below that have the ability to attach existing files, add in GIFs, and then from the three-dot ellipsis, notice here there's also other apps that we can bring in, whether it's then sharing a YouTube video, but because we're talking about coffee, I'm going to click on the Places app and search for a nearby coffee cafe. All right, here's Starbucks. We'll grab that and ask, how does this look? And you'll notice here that that's now giving a much richer experience. Beyond just sending a name, it's given me even the ability to click on directions, or we could go to the website itself. What's also really powerful is you'll see here that I also can then see any files that have been shared between us, so we can work together in private. Very powerful for a private breakout space, also for example thinking of students working together, as well as also any recent activity or where Kara is in terms of her reporting lines in the organization. Notice if I go back to the lunch crew, this is, again, we have that space for the Files tab, and we can also then bring in some other apps as well. And so this is really powerful in the private space. You can start to customize this just like you can customize a team experience. And I'll show you a bit more about apps later on. Last but not least, what does it look like to actually start a chat? So simply here from the new chat option, we go up and we search for someone within the organization. So we can see here that right now I'm going to have a conversation with Sophia. So I'm going to say, good afternoon, could we meet today at 4 p.m. about the upcoming exam review? And then we simply hit enter, and just like that, we now have private, safe, and secure communication within the context of our organization. All right, next up, Teams. So from the Teams tab, you'll notice that I have a view of all of the teams that I'm a member of. And a quick tip here, I have the ability to also reorganize the teams themselves. So again, this is just a really easy way to be able to organize your view. Let's say right now I'm not actively working in the health research team, so I can simply click on hide, and that moves this down to being hidden along the bottom right-hand side. I click show, and it comes back. Now we'll go into depth about teams in just a moment, but we'll continue the overview of the tabs on the left-hand side here. So the assignment service allows us to then have a view of all of the assignments that we have created as part of the classes that we are teaching. From the student's perspective, of course, they will see the assignments, but they will not see the teacher view. So right now as the teacher, I can see that none of my students have yet turned in the assignments as part of these, the lab reports and some of the expression homework that I've set for them. I can also see upcoming drafts of assignments that I might be working on before I send them out to students, as well as also any of the assignments that I have graded over time. Now, next up we have the calendar. And from the calendar, you can see here, this is exactly the same as my Exchange calendar. So for those who have calendar events set up right now, which is most people, you'll see this looks identical within the context of Teams. Extremely powerful because this is Office 365 working together. This is also how we can create a new meeting, which allows us to then meet online. And Teams has very powerful online meeting capabilities, which we'll show a little bit later on. From the Calls tab, this is where I can then have video calls or telephony calls with members of my organization. And if you have the license for it, this is also where you can click here and you'll have the ability to have a dial pad to be able to call someone. And so this is very powerful, so you don't ever have to give out your personal mobile phone number, and you can still have a desk phone number that can now move with you. Extremely powerful and a great way to also then keep things like privacy and security, so you don't have to give out your personal mobile phone number for people to still be able to contact you. Now from the Files tab, this is where we can see recent files we've worked on, the files we have access to across our Teams, as well as also any of the files you have in your private OneDrive storage. Note, Teams is also a very powerful platform in terms of extensibility, so you can see here Add Cloud Storage. And if your organization supports it, this is where you can have then also integrations with Dropbox, Box, and even Google Drive. Very, very powerful. But keep in mind, of course, only store files here if your organization supports it. And as a rule of thumb, store your files within OneDrive and SharePoint, because this is free, secure, safe cloud storage that is provided to then all staff and students and is fantastic within Office 365 for education. The three-dot ellipsis allows you to see the additional apps within your organization, so things like the OneNote Class Notebook, Staff Notebook, and we also have a shift service to do things like organizing shifts. So very powerful if we think about things like on-campus workers, whether that's students or facility maintenance, and there's many more apps that we have available from the store. And if you haven't yet already installed the app on your phone, if you click on the Get App, it sends you a link to then the App Store, and this is for both iPhone and Android devices. And then you can see here on the left-hand side from Apps, we have the App Store. And so this is an important place to spend some time to really review the apps that you have available. And this is powerful because what this allows us to do is take third-party apps like Trello, Jira, and hundreds of others to be able to really extend the capability of our team. Just like your smartphone, remember to keep in mind that those applications may be free, may be paid, and then of course, we as Microsoft make sure they're secure from a code point of view, but beyond that, it is up to the app developer on the quality of the experience and also how the data is used. So make sure you do read that privacy policy. And last but not least, Help is a great place to go to be able to see things like training videos, what's new, and much more. All right, so let's have a look at Teams. And before we do creating a team, well, what does this view look like from a mobile device? All right, so here we have Teams on the phone, and you'll notice that the view, of course, is adapted to the smaller phone screen, but it's extremely important that you then use the Teams capabilities across devices, because this is something that makes it much easier to communicate and collaborate with your colleagues and also with your students. So you'll see here right now, I'm actually logged in as Kara, so we see it from a different point of view. And I can see here the teams that I'm a part of, so we can go in and we can have a look at, for example, algebra, and I can simply click on General, and then in a few quick seconds, there is all of the information as part of this team. I can see those upcoming assignments, I can see the calendar, and where it's particularly interesting is if we go to that activity feed, you can see here the response from Ken. Now, this is where if I click on chat, well, we have the same thing. I've got my lunch crew view, and then I've got the ability to see Ken's response, and just like that, we have a rich experience from the point of view within the phone. Notice up along the top, we can then also see any shared files that we might have together, as well as also any of the other integrations that we've decided to bring into our team. I can then also turn this into a group chat with just the tap of a button. Really powerful and really easy. Now notice back here, if we go back to the view, there is that line in the center of the screen. If I simply drag my finger up, this is where I can also do things like calls, see files, my saved messages, as well as also even taking a photo and then using the intelligent camera to be able to then bring in things like documents that are automatically corrected. Very, very powerful and extremely useful. So that's a quick example of how we then can start to see Teams from the phone. So here we are back within the desktop view of Teams. And from the Teams tab, I can see, of course, the groups that I'm a part of, which are things like entrepreneurship, the health research team that I'm in. But how do we create our own team, whether it's a course, whether it's a staff community, or another project team, for example? Well, from the Join Create Team button, you'll see here now I have the option to create a team or join a team with a code. You might also see that there are then other teams that appear here, which you can request to join. So things like it might be a chess club, it might be a staff's professional learning community. You have the ability to create public teams, which will appear here, that people within your university or school district can then find and then join. So really great for open communities. And when it's public, it's not public to people outside of your organization, just those who are actual staff members and students within the same institution. So here we have the ability to then join via a team code. So if you want to have a team and really quickly add a group of people, you can simply then provide a 6-character code, and then that way they've got the ability to type this in here and instantly join. But of course, this only works with people in the same institution. Now, the most important one is the Create Team option here. So you'll see here when I click Create Team, it gives me then 4 different options of the different team types. We have classes, professional learning community, staff, and other. Now, if you don't see the option to create a team, this means you do need to go and have a conversation with your IT department because they have disabled this capability for you. And one thing to be aware of is the most successful schools and particularly universities and colleges do allow staff members to be able to self-create teams. And so this is really where we have then within Office 365 all of the governance tools that are required for IT to allow staff members to be able to self-create teams, while then certainly keeping things like naming conventions, expiration policy, file retention, those can all be automated and certainly making sure that we meet governance requirements. From a student's point of view, if a student clicks Create Team, this is where they would only be able to create the other team type. A student can't create a class team or a staff team, for example. But again, particularly in colleges and higher education, we do recommend the ability for students to be able to self-create teams, of course, when you're taking advantage of the appropriate governance policies within Office 365. But this is again really about empowering students in those later years who are more mature to be able to develop the job-ready skills that they need to transition into the workplace. And so certainly this is an important set of capabilities for both staff and also students in the later years. Now, what's the difference between these 4 different team types? Well, I'm going to pause from this screen because I've got a quick PowerPoint slide that might make it a little bit easier to know what the difference is. So here we are with just a quick overview slide that I prepared earlier to make it a bit easier to understand what is the difference between the different team types. And fundamentally, the thing to keep in mind is these are just templates. All of the core capabilities around working together on documents, editing files, adding in apps, using online meetings, it's all the same across the team types. The reason we have the different types, though, is there are different scenarios where having a bit more of a structure around the team and a few changes in the capabilities of the team can be really effective, depending if you are using it as a teacher in a classroom compared to if you are a staff leader working with other staff members. So what's the difference between the different types that we have here? So firstly, the class team. As the name would suggest, it's working together with yourself as a teacher with students in the class. So students are members, yourself as the teacher are the owner of that team. And this is where we have then really powerful education enhancements. So giving all of our students in our class a space where they can take private notes and a space where I've got a notebook where I can then digitize the handout of worksheets, of materials, and give all of my students a collaboration space. This is all made available through the OneNote class notebook, and it's a really powerful tool to give a framework for learning and a really fantastic way for students to be able to, as I mentioned, do things like private note-taking where they can't see each other's work. We also then have a very rich assignment service. And so this is where you can then, of course, assign whether it's topics, essays, or quizzes to students, and then they can turn those back in. Very, very powerful. The assignment service allows you to then do things like rubric grading. It also allows things like automated marking with the integration of quizzes, which can then be self-marked, and it's a very, very powerful way to give feedback to students and track learning over time. We also see some other changes in the class team, like students cannot leave, And students have the ability where you as the teacher, when they post into a message space, you can actually control that and you can mute students, which means they can no longer post into the conversation spaces of your class team until you choose to unmute those students. So a really great way for a bit of classroom management if you do have a disruptive student, or alternatively if you do need to draw everyone's attention, and therefore again you can mute all students just temporarily. Now moving on. So what about then if we have colleagues working together? Well, it's no longer a teacher and a student, we're professionals, and maybe we want to create a team to be able to then have within a school district, for example, some of the math teachers between different schools come together in a virtual space to share best practices. Well, that's why we have the Professional Learning Community, or PLC, team type. And you'll see here the difference is very much around the OneNote notebook. So it's no longer myself as a teacher and you as a student, because we're professionals. We have the OneNote PLC notebook. We also then have none of the other capabilities of the classroom team type, because again, it's no longer us working together in a classroom, so there's no more assignment service. We're not muting each other because again, we're professionals, even though maybe sometimes you might want to mute the other people. This is where again, it's more of the focus on us working together as peers, as colleagues. Now, what about myself if I then want to run a staff department? So if you are a staff leader, this is where the staff team type gives you the OneNote staff notebook. And if you've not used it before, I'll show you a little bit later on what it looks like. But this is again giving a structured OneNote notebook. So it's the same OneNote notebook that if you're using OneNote today, but with a framework around it, which gives me a collaboration space, a content library, and then a private space for each of my staff members. So really effective if we're thinking around professional development and you want a private place that you can give each of your staff members feedback, maybe on classroom observations. And the last type, which is the other type, this is the least templated team. So you'll notice here there's no different types of OneNote notebook, it's just a generic blank OneNote notebook, and you have none of the assignment services. So actually, if you're doing things like projects, if you're doing things like research, if you are in almost any scenario where you're not a staff leader giving feedback to staff members, if you're not running a professional learning community or you're not teaching a class, most of the time you'll actually want to pick the other team type because it's got the least templating and it's the most flexible out of the box if you don't need those extra elements of structure around your team. So these are the 4 team types and very, very powerful. So let's see what they actually look like when we create one. Jumping back over to the actual view of teams, let's do a scenario where I want to work together with a few colleagues because we're going to update some of the content in one of the courses. So we're going to review the existing content as part of a project to enhance it for a coming term. So I'm going to pick the other team type because again, I'm working with colleagues. I'm not a staff leader and I don't need a private space for each of my staff members. I'm working together as peers with the other members of this project team. So I'm going to click on Other. And then from here, you'll see I've got the ability to create a team name. I can then give it a description. I can make this team public or private. And again, that means public or private within the context of your organization. It's never public that someone outside of your organization can find it. And then you can see here an important tip. You can actually reuse teams over time. So you can actually create templates, super powerful. So if I quickly click on this as the example, let's say I was doing the health research as maybe a follow-up project, I could choose this team. And you'll see here I can reuse things like the tabs, the settings, I can even bring across the same members as before. But in this example, I don't want to reuse the health project because this is a separate type of content review that we're doing. So let me quickly go back, create team, click Other, and we're going to start a brand new team on a course review for a hypothetical course, INB 301. And so as part of this review, we can say this is the project review team for the course 301, and this is just an example of a course that we might have. It could be any type of course, whether it's business, computer science. This is really just an example team name. So I'm going to click Next. And you'll see here, now I've got the option to add some team members. So I can simply then search for people via their name. So for example, we can then bring in Jennifer. I'm also going to bring in Alan, as well as also Nesta, and one last person, we've got Kara as well. And so you can see here, we can also bring in people if you have an existing distribution list, or also alternatively a security group. So you have then multiple ways that you can add in people to teams, and you can also bulk add people to teams as well. One thing to keep in mind is IT have the ability to automate team creation. So if you are teaching classes, the creation process of a class team, for example, that should all be automated. You shouldn't have to ever type in, for example, 25 student names. But if you do need to, at any point you can always create the teams yourself. But thinking about using teams at scale, definitely automation is the right approach. What I can also do is, you'll see here, there's 2 types of roles that a person can have, a member or an owner. So right now, Kara, let's say, is also one of the key people who is part of this project. So I'm going to promote her to being an owner, which means she has the same capabilities over controlling this team as myself, and everyone else can be a member. Let's click close. And so here we are, our brand new team that's been created. We can see here, before when I was talking about the different team types, you'll notice there's no OneNote class notebook, there's no assignment service, because right now this is the other team type. It's got the least templating around it. Absolutely, when I click on this add tab, tabs give you the ability to customize your team. So think about them like adding in extra capabilities. So you can see here, I could add in a OneNote notebook for us to do some note taking. I could add in some existing files that might be in SharePoint. I could bring in, for example, a web resource. So this is any website with a secure website URL. I could bring in a YouTube video as reference materials. There's hundreds of apps that we can then bring into the team and really start to extend and customize the capabilities of the team that we have. How are we going to start working together in our brand new project team? Well, of course, the key part here is communication, and then we can start getting into some of the files and other areas of the project that we're going to be working together on. So what are some of the best practices from a communication point of view? The most important thing to be aware of when we have communication within the context of a team is it's all about using the @mention. It is super critical because this is how we then target communication to either individuals, subgroups, or everyone within our team. If you don't use the @mention, people will not receive a notification. So this is where it's so important, and you'll see here it says start a new conversation, type @mention to mention someone. So I'll go here. And right now it says @, and I can see already a few suggestions, Kara, Jennifer, and other members within the team. But let's pretend that, for example, right now, I want to welcome everyone to the team and let them know that we have a meeting coming up on Friday. Well, I could type out everyone's name, but that's not very practical, particularly if this team gets bigger where we might have 20, 30, 50 people or more as part of it. So what do we do? Well, in this example, I want to notify everybody in the team. So I can start writing the word team, and notice now it actually picks up the team name. This will then allow me to notify everybody in the team by simply typing the word @team and picking the team name. Now I'm going to type team meeting this Friday. See you there. All right, let's hit send and go. This is extremely useful because now we have the ability where this will notify everyone in the team. This will send them that push notification on their phone, on their laptop, and again, my team members can then reply back to me. We have then the reactions in the top right-hand side here. Notice that also when someone replies to me, that is in the context of the original post. So you'll see here there's the very important reply button below each threaded conversation. And this is an important difference between the chat space. There's no threads in the chat space, it's all a persistent conversation. Whereas here we can see that Kara has directly replied to my original post. And she's also asked that she can't make this in person, but can we have an online meeting? Absolutely. And one of the other best practices when it comes to then managing a team is to also have multiple channels. So channels for things like your meetings, the tasks that need to be had, or if you're running a class, channels for your different weeks of content or your different topics. To create a channel, you'll notice here that if I go over and then click on add channel, let's give this a channel name called tasks and meetings. And I can also make sure that if I click automatically show, that this will appear in everyone's view as one of the channels that are pinned as part of this team. So I simply click add, and you'll notice here, this creates a brand new conversation space, a new file space. But again, because we're part of the team, we all have access to this. We have the channel, so now let's create a meeting for it. You'll see here, I'm going to go over to calendar, and then from the calendar itself, I have the ability to go create a new meeting. This allows us to then create a meeting just similar in concept to like you do, for example, in Outlook. We'll give it a meeting name. We'll call this Project Meeting Week 1. And you'll see here the location. I'm going to leave it blank because it's an online Teams meeting. I can then also invite people. So this could be any possible name as well. So for example, this could also be someone who might be external to the organization. So if you see me typing in a person's name, Jennifer, she's a teacher, so therefore I can find her. But if maybe we have then someone like Jamie Orton at say Gmail or Outlook.com, you'll notice again, I can invite them to this meeting as someone external to the organization. They do not need to have Teams to be able to join. It's a one-off Teams meeting. It's not associated to any existing team that you have, so then it would be a meeting between myself as Ken and Jamie. But in the example that we're doing right now, we want to meet together with an existing team that we have. So I'm going to go select a channel to meet in. And you'll see here that if I go over to the course review project, and I'm going to pick that nice tasks and meetings channel that we just created. Let's organize now to meet at from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. And we're going to do that on next Friday, the 25th. So let's click schedule. Just like that, we now have our project meeting scheduled. You can see here, if I click on it, whether it's from my phone or in example from the team channel, I can click join. This also shows up in Outlook. So again, this will show up in your Outlook calendar to help people be aware of when they need to meet up. And you can see there, we now have our project meeting on week 1. Well, what about then preparing for that meeting? We need to have some files as part of this course review. And this is where it's very, very useful as part of the file space. We can work together in real time with colleagues. So I'm going to add a file. I could either create a brand new file, or of course I can upload an existing. So let me copy a file that I have set up in my OneDrive across into this team. I've got an existing course syllabus that I want to be reviewing with my team members in the team that we've just created. So I'm going to copy that over. So you'll see here, I go over and click copy. I'm going to then browse teams and channels, and I'm going to send this one over to the course review project and task and meeting, because this is going to be one of the tasks that we have as part of the meeting, is to review that syllabus. You'll see here, when I go back across, it says one file has been copied, and now I can head over and then edit this document in real time. Notice when I go to click and edit a document, I have the ability to edit in Teams, open in the desktop app, or edit in the browser. What's really powerful about this is I can then work together in real time with other people, which is very, very helpful and very powerful. You'll see in the top right hand corner, I can also start a conversation. So for example, this is in the context of the document, which means I could then say, ask Kara to review before Friday. And what this will do is we'll send, of course, Kara now a notification, because I didn't @mention the whole team, I just @mentioned Kara. And so this is, again, a very, very important piece of make sure you @mention people. And just like that, Kara got the message, so she obviously received the notification because there was the @mention. And then we can see here that in real time, as Kara is working on the document, I can then see those comments, those edits, and those changes being made to the document in real time. There's no sharing links that we have to send out, because this is all part of the team that we're already in. Really powerful capability of Teams. And when I click on close and go over to the conversation space, you can see here the conversation that was being had in the context of that document. Now that we've had a look at creating our own team, let's take some examples that have already been set up previously across those different scenarios that I had mentioned from before. You'll see here, if I go over back to all of my teams, well, what does it look like if we were using Teams in a health research example? So imagine, say, researchers coming together, and this is where we can see very different channels and, of course, existing then conversations. We can see here that Arden has not only created a title for his conversation post, he's also included then some code as part of the conversation topic. Now that's really powerful, because I can go down to click format, and then just like how Arden has done, I can add a subject, I can even embed links and code snippets. So we have a really rich conversation that's taking place as part of this research project. You can also see they've got then different channels, one for data collection, and as part of that, it's got a Power BI dashboard where the data is being visualized. And so over time, you can see how then that data might be brought together, that we can quickly and easily see in the context of not just a static image, but this is the real data in this dashboard. So if I go across, you'll see here, for example, this might be as part of health. Of course, clean, fresh water is a very, very important part of that. And if I click on a specific area, you'll notice then that the data updates as part of the maps and as part of what's being shown within the context of this dashboard. I can go over to the grant process channel, and you'll see here, for example, they're using then Planner. And remember, you can then add in these tabs from the Add tab button. And this is where, just like the Power BI, the planner allows us to then organize tasks between our team members. And within this, you'll see, for example, that we have then a to-do in progress and completed. We can see here that we have, for example, release funds as part of the grant that's required, that's been assigned to Kara. We can see then different tasks as they're being made and also update those in real time. We can also click and drag them across between the different buckets. Really powerful from a research collaboration perspective. If I go back to all of the teams, let's have a look now at, for example, our Pineview School. So you'll see here, this is an example of a staff team. And how do we know it's a staff team? Well, notice because we have then a conversation files and a staff notebook. This is really powerful because this then gives structure to us as staff members working together within the context of this school. You can see here that the OneNote staff notebook is a fantastic tool which provides the ability for a collaboration space, a content library, and a private space for each staff member. As a quick tip, you'll notice I can also click on the expand arrows to give myself a bit more screen real estate when I'm working together with my colleagues in the context of the OneNote staff notebook. I can also do other things. You'll notice here it says school calendar. Well, what is the school calendar? Right now that's a PDF that has been attached, and you can see here as part of that PDF, I can then view, for example, the upcoming schedule and the upcoming school calendar. Again, really useful. Now, the last type that I'll focus on is then using teams within a course teaching context. And you'll see here, I'll go over to the algebra team. We can tell this is a class team by the class notebook and the assignments. And one of the powerful things about the class notebook is, for those who haven't used it before, it's a fantastic feature of OneNote, where you have the class notebook which provides a framework for learning. You'll notice here that I have then a collaboration space, a content library, and a private notebook for each of my students. As the teacher, I can see all of my students and the sections within and all of the work that those students are completing, but the students cannot see each other's work. This can also save me a lot of time as a teacher because, again, this is giving me a place where I can then help to digitize a lot of the work that would normally require printouts, which can also then save me a lot of costs. So one of the fantastic things that I can do as part of the class notebook is I can take the worksheets in the content library where students cannot edit, and I can distribute a copy of that to my students. So imagine, instead of having to walk around the room, before the class even starts, I can simply go click distribute page. And what I'm going to do now is go over and distribute that page to my students. You can see here, I'm going to go over and click on the handout section and then click distribute. You can see that I've done this a little bit in the past, and of course then it lets me know, and then it'll just take a few moments to then sync to all of my students' notebooks. Perfect. And then we can go and see for each of my students, they now have a copy of that worksheet. When I go over to handouts, and there we can see week 1 has a copy that she can now work on. So very powerful. One of the other important things about the OneNote class notebook is we also have a real focus on creating inclusive classrooms. And so this extends to Microsoft Teams as well as OneNote and other products. And so as part of creating a more inclusive learning space, you can see here from View, when I click on the Immersive Reader, what this does is it allows me to then customize the view of this to then support my learning needs. So if I'm a student, for example, who has visual requirements where I might need text to be larger or smaller, I might need it to have different background colors to again help me with focusing within the context of my class. Or for example, I can go through and even then highlight things like the nouns, or alternatively going through and focus on a single line at a time. So really creating a much more inclusive experience for students. And so this is extremely powerful when we think about then providing a more flexible learning experience for students without having to put that back onto the teacher to be able to customize it for every student. They are empowered to do this. And what's even better is I can then also go through and click play to hear it spoken aloud. Now, as part of that, I can change the speed of the voice as well as also the different types of voices that I hear. And this makes the OneNote class notebook and Microsoft Teams really powerful to create a more flexible and inclusive learning space. And this is available also for Teams chat messages, and it's in other Office 365 products. From the assignment tab, This is where, as the name suggests, I can create my assignments, I can see students' work, how many have turned in their assignment. You've got the ability from here to create an assignment, so this could have an essay. This allows me to do rubric grading. Very, very powerful and very rich in terms of the capabilities. But what I want to show you is a quick example also of a quiz. So this is how I can save time and do things like automated marking. So you'll see here I can take an existing quiz, and so this is a Microsoft form, and then that can then be distributed to my students. I simply go over and click Next, and then what we can see here is all of the categories which would normally be filled in as part of a normal assignment, but now it's automatically added in the forms quiz, and it's automatically added in the possible points. If I'd created an assignment, this could have been an essay, for example, and I could have then chosen the amount of points, or if I use a rubric to grade. But because I'm using a quiz in this example, it makes it really quick to save time, where it's automatically picked up the total number of points from that forms quiz that I had pre-created. I can also go over and set the due date. I can set which students that this will be given to. I can be multiple classes, or I can set it to individual students or select groups of students if I then select their names from the list here. I've also got the ability to schedule this in advance, so really powerful if I want to organize my class in advance, and then therefore it only would be posted at a certain date. And I can also then define the close date where no more students can then be able to submit, even if a late submission is allowed after the close date. That's it. So to submit the assignment, or I should say to assign the assignment, simply click the button up on the top right hand side. And that's it. That's now been sent out to my students for them to complete. Now you'll see here, very, very useful to see all of the assignments that have been sent out. And then I have due tomorrow the maths and addition and subtraction. So what would this then look like from the point of view of student? As a student, this is where my view of the assignments is, of course, I can't create the assignment, but then I can see the assignments that are coming up, but of course not who has turned it in. Here is the maths quiz that was just sent out a few moments ago by the teacher. And this is where I can see here that right now the work is to complete this quiz. Now notice when I click on it, this is taking me to a Microsoft form. So if I quickly fill in the quiz, let's get a few correct. Let's just get a few incorrect while we're at it. And perfect. Quickly click submit, and what you can see here is it says, thanks, your response was submitted. And immediately, because this was a quiz, it's automated the marking. But then as a teacher, I also have the opportunity to give additional feedback to my students. So let's switch back to the teacher view. Back to the point of view of the teacher, I can now see that one of my students has then turned in the assignment. I can head over, and what this will allow me to do then is, because this is automatically marked, I don't have to mark it myself, and then we can see here that that quiz that Adele had turned in, she got 2 out of 6. I can click directly on her name to be able to see exactly how she performed, and then from here I can then also give her some feedback as well. For example, might want to review week 3 content as the example here. We can click close. And then now that I've given her some feedback, I'm going to officially return her grade. And there we go. That's the assignments complete. What this allows us to do is then work very effectively and efficiently to give students meaningful feedback. Given all the work that we've now just done recently together, what does this all look like from the phone? So let's finish off and show a quick view of that. As a staff member then using the mobile app, we can see here that course review team that we set up earlier. Within this, I can see those files that we're working together on before, as well as also to join the online meeting, I would simply tap on the meeting and just tap join. Nice and incredibly easy. Then if we head back over to the algebra team that we're a part of, we can look at the assignments that were coming up, and just like that, from there I've got the ability to see the assignment that was created, as well as also the grading that was done. And I can do all of this from my phone, which makes this incredibly powerful to be productive across devices. So that's a wrap. What I'll do is, just to finish off this webinar today, I'm going to head back to some PowerPoint slides with a few next steps. Following the session today, head over to the Office Support website for a whole host of best practice getting started videos. For educators, make sure to go to education.microsoft.com, where you can then also do on-demand courses available for free and also receive recognition as part of the Microsoft Innovative Educator Program. And please join us for our advanced session to go even in more depth through the topics that you've heard as part of today. My name's Dominic. Thank you so much for joining this webinar.